Hello and welcome to my class, Nutrition Beyond the Basics. So this is the second episode in my 3-episode mini-series going off of my original class, 5 Pillars of Health. So in 5 Pillars of Health, we learned about physical activity and exercise, nutrition, mindfulness, sleep, and your environment. We touched on each of those subjects and how they relate to overall health in the body. In this 3-video mini-series, I will be expanding on the topics of nutrition today, physical activity and exercise in a later episode, and I already have my first episode on mindfulness and the gut-brain connection out. So we're going to be diving deeper into the pool of each of those. So just to give you a little introduction of myself, my name is Brittany Kerrigan. I am a WSU Nutrition and Exercise Physiology undergraduate student at the Elson S. Floyd College of Medicine here in Spokane, Washington. So the purpose of this class is to provide education and spread awareness on specific health-related topics using scientific-based evidence and professional recommendations. The hope is for you to take what resonates with you and apply it to your life in ways that you see fit. So take what resonates and leave what does not. And then just a little bit of a disclaimer, none of the following information is a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. So please consult a licensed healthcare professional for those things. I am just an undergraduate nutrition and exercise physiology student, so just keep that in mind as we go through all this information. So for today's agenda, we are going to be first focusing on education on food and diving into intuitive eating. And then at the end of this lecture, we're going to end with a little cooking demo on 3 different flavors of hummus that you can make on your own. So just to give you a little introduction on the class, in 5 Pillars of Health, we learned about macronutrients and micronutrients. We also learned about calories and the negative health effects of the American diet. We learned what a whole food diet is and the negative health effects of dieting. And finally, we briefly touched on intuitive eating. So in this episode of the mini-series, I will be expanding on how to eat a more whole foods diet, intuitive eating, and then we will end again with a short cooking demonstration. So our class objectives for the day, by the end of this class, you should be more familiar with what ultra-processed food is and how it can impact your life, what a whole foods diet is and what it looks like, the negative health impacts of dieting, and intuitive eating. Also, by the end of this class, you should be able to make 3 varieties of hummus at home. So first, we're just going to start by talking about food and kind of defining what food is, because it can be a little confusing. And there's a lot of sources out there telling us different things. So let's kind of straighten some things out. So first, we're going to start off with ultra-processed food. So what is ultra-processed food? Ultra-processed foods are foods that have been extensively altered and have several added ingredients like fat, sugar, and artificial ingredients such as colors or preservatives. So some examples of ultra-processed food, as you can see on the slide here, are frozen meals, hot dogs, fast food, packaged cookies or chips, other items like that, and soda or other sugar-sweetened beverages such as Red Bull. And then, as we learned in my original class, 5 Pillars of Health, some of the negative health effects that can come along with eating a diet heavy in processed foods are cardiovascular disease, hypertension, cancer, type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, and others such as overweight and obesity. And the standard American diet is typically high in saturated fat, sodium, and ultra-processed foods. Again, we just talked about ultra-processed foods, and the typical American diet is low in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and fiber, and these are linked with several chronic diseases, the ones that we just talked about. So next, moving on to processed food, I want you to really pay attention to the differences here. So here we have ultra-processed food, and here we have processed food. So processed foods are foods that are minimally processed, so changing the food from its natural state or altered by the addition of salt, oil, sugar, or things like that. So processed foods are things like canned tuna or salmon, canned fruits and vegetables, milk, cheese, and yogurt, freshly made breads or baked goods. So this is not going to include the breads on the bread aisle that are already pre-packaged and pre-made when they get to the grocery store. Another example would be salted nuts. So now moving on to whole foods or very minimally processed. So whole foods are foods that are in their natural form or a very slightly altered state. So some examples of whole foods or examples of alterations to foods that are still considered whole foods are removal of inedible parts. So this is often done with grains, also drying, crushing, roasting, boiling, freezing, and then also pasteurization. So some examples of whole foods or minimally processed foods are going to be your raw bagged carrots, apples, raw chicken, melon, frozen vegetables, or even raw unsalted nuts. So a little tip for eating whole foods and kind of sticking to a mainly whole foods diet is to stick to the outside aisles of the grocery stores, such as the produce section, the meat section, the bulk section, etc. So if you can picture walking into your grocery store, you're usually going to have your aisles in the middle, and then you're going to have either on the left hand or the right hand side, you're going to have your produce section. So what I mean by sticking to the outside of the aisles is just kind of staying in that outside perimeter of those middle aisles, because those middle aisles often contain most of our ultra processed foods. So, have you ever felt like this guy, maybe in a diet or in a restrictive way of eating? If you have, you might be in the right place today. So, now we're going to get into dieting and is dieting good or bad? So, first, I want to start off with just a reminder of some definitions of the word diet. So, I used these definitions in my original class, 5 Pillars of Health. So for my first definition, a diet can be a short-term change in eating habits to induce a specific outcome, such as weight loss. And this usually involves restriction to induce the specific outcome. And so that's what I'm referring to when I say dieting here. Another definition could be the way one eats in their everyday lifestyle or long term. So when I say a mostly whole foods diet, what I mean is not a restrictive way of eating. What I mean is finding a way that you can eat that is more of a lifestyle and less of a short term change in your life. So that way it can be more sustainable. Because as we can see from our slide here, some of the negative health impacts of dieting. Our diets are just not sustainable long term. When we restrict ourselves from specific foods, it can actually make that food more appealing to us and lead to behaviors like binging and disordered eating, among other negative health consequences. So I also just wanted to touch on the diet industry. So the diet industry is mostly out to get your money. If they have an ad and they're telling you this is proven to cause weight loss, they're probably trying to sell you something. In science, you really can't prove anything. You can only support it with evidence. So if someone is saying this is proven, they unfortunately are probably just trying to get your money. And diet culture can have negative impacts on our health. Like I said, when we restrict ourselves, we can see behaviors such as increased binge eating, preoccupation with food, feelings of being deprived, a sense of failure. We can also see a decreased metabolic rate and even a sense of willpower. So the scientific evidence shows that most people that go on diets do not sustain that weight loss long term. They usually gain it back within a year and often even more at an even greater rate than they were before. So they'll gain even more weight back. So when we restrict ourselves again, that can kind of cause us to have this belief that a specific food is bad. And then again, that can just lead to an unhealthy relationship with food. So, what is the answer to this? And that is moderation. Moderation is key. So, it's okay to eat ultra processed foods every now and then. We know what can happen if we eat a high diet in ultra processed foods, but if we can consume them in moderation, that is a much better option for our health. So now we're going to move on to intuitive eating. So we touched briefly on this in my last course, and this is a really big topic, and I could do a whole hour lecture on it as well. So a lot of the information that I am using is from a really great book. It is called Intuitive Eating, and I will share more about that at the end of this lecture. So let's get into intuitive eating. So why should you possibly think about eating intuitively? Well, because we are all different individuals and we all have bio-individual needs. There is no one-size-fits-all diet or a magic quick fix to life and our health problems. So we are born with the ability to naturally regulate our energy relative to our body's needs and follow our instincts such as hunger and satiety cues or even eating a specific food. We naturally do this as children and often unlearn it as we grow older. Maybe when a parent labeled a specific food as good or bad, or asked you to eat 2 more bites of your meat and the rest of your peas after you said you were full. And I just want to do a little disclaimer on this that your parents did not mean to cause this reaction by doing that. They probably had your best interest in mind. So our bodies give us these cues for a reason. And it's okay and possible to become in tune with your body, to listen to your instincts, and to follow satiety and hunger cues, as well as what suits your palate. So, what does intuitive eating look like? Intuitive eating looks like following your hunger signals, following signals of fullness, not feeling negatively about the food you eat. So, not feeling anxious or badly or beating yourself up for eating a slice of pizza or a scoop of ice cream or forcing yourself to eat kale. An intuitive eater is an unaffected eater. So you're not bothered by your food choices, you're confident in them. And this can be very difficult in the society we live in. There's ads all around and people everywhere telling us what and how to eat. So now we're going to get into kind of a how to eat intuitively. And these are the 10 principles of intuitive eating. And they are from the book that I will kind of share again my details with you later on. So we'll kind of go through all these steps. So first is reject the diet mentality. So get rid of all your diet books, your articles, stop following that keto influencer on Instagram, and reject diet culture. It is not for your benefit and it does not have your best interest in mind. Next, honor your hunger. This one's kind of self-explanatory, but if you're hungry, eat some food. It's okay to do so. Again, your body sends you these cues for a reason. Next, make peace with food. All allergies, food sensitivities, and medical conditions aside, give yourself permission to eat what you like. And remember that depriving yourself of something can actually increase your desire for that food and lead to things like binging and eating past the point of fullness. So moving on to number 4, challenge the food police. Throw out terms like good or bad when you're referring to food. Food doesn't need to be viewed as good or bad. It's food. You need carbs, protein, and fat to live your life. You need carbs for energy, so don't be afraid to eat them. 5, discover the satisfaction factor. So discover the pleasure and satisfaction that come along with the experience of eating in an inviting environment and listening to your body. Next, moving on to number 6. So feel your fullness. Listen to your body's fullness cues. And in order to do this, you need to trust yourself that you will allow yourself to eat the foods that you desire. Um, So, a good way to kind of feel your fullness and know when you're full is to stop halfway through eating and just check in with yourself and see where your hunger level is at and see how the food is tasting to you. So, if you made this meal of quinoa and kale and you're eating it and it's kind of not sitting well with your stomach, don't force yourself to eat that kale. Eat something else that sounds better if that's what suits you best. So, number 7, cope with your emotions with kindness. So be gentle and nurturing with yourself and your emotions and try not to tie them with food because those are two separate entities. Next, moving on to number 8, respect your body and love yourself. Your body does so much for you. So accept and love yourself for who you are and the body you're in today, in this moment, in every moment. And I know that can be easier said than done, but it's a practice that we can build on over time. So 9, movement, feel the difference. Move and be active and experience the positive health effects that movement can have on things such as mood and energy, and forget burning calories. You don't need to do some crazy workout regimen if it's not what suits you best and what makes you feel the best. So focus on how movement makes you feel and how it feels to move your body. And lastly, but definitely not least, honor your health with gentle nutrition. So choose foods in a lifestyle that take your health into account as well as your taste buds. What matters is what you eat in the long term. Having ice cream or chips in moderation is not going to make you unhealthy, and you don't have to eat this clean, perfect diet to be healthy either. Again, moderation is key. So, our conclusions. A diet high in ultra-processed foods can have negative health consequences and should be consumed in moderation. Our bodies are so smart, and it is possible to become in tune with them, to listen to satiety cues and hunger cues, and eat the foods that we desire. So, in conclusion, what small changes can you make in your life today to begin eating intuitively or to honor your body and your health? Go ahead and spend some time on your own today or in the next few days when you can and reflect on that. So now I just kind of want to highlight this book where I got a lot of my information on intuitive eating from. I actually kind of learned a little bit about intuitive eating indirectly in a class I took that was called Nutrition Through the Life Cycles. But then I found this great book called Intuitive Eating, a revolutionary program that works. Um, and it is by the women that you can see here. So yeah, I really recommend this book. It's got a lot of great information in it. I have shared um, a portion of that information with you today, but unfortunately this lecture is a little too short to share it all with you. So yeah, get your hands on this if you can. So next here is my little reference slide. I'll just leave this here for a moment in case you would like to refer to any of this. This bottom link here for the image is actually for this for the book I just showed you, and that is actually a link to Amazon where you can buy it if you wish to do so. So now we're going to move on to my little interactive cooking demo. So we're going to be making 3 kinds of hummus. These are the ingredients you need. 1 can of chickpeas. Olive oil is actually optional. That's just used as a kind of plating topping. Also tahini and lemon juice, which were also optional, but I do recommend them because they add a lot of flavor and depth to this recipe. Salt and pepper to taste. And then for our flavors, we have garlic, roasted red bell pepper, and roasted beet. And also, don't forget to add a little bit of love in there. So please join me in the next portion of this class for a short cooking demo. Hello and welcome to my cooking show. Today we're going to be making 3 kinds of hummus. So I already have my ingredients kind of TV magic prepped up. So we're going to start off with 1 can of chickpeas or garbanzo beans. So this is what mine look like. They actually came in a carton, so they usually have about 13 to 15 ounces in there. So you're gonna need just 1 can or 1 package of those, and then go ahead and drain and rinse them. We are also going to need a can or jar of tahini, well mixed. So go ahead and open that up and make sure it is well mixed up. We're also going to need half of a lemon, and then some salt and pepper to taste. And then for our 3 flavors, we have roasted beets, red bell pepper, roasted red bell pepper, and some garlic cloves. So we can see I kind of have all these little flavor additions all prepped up. So go ahead and grab those. Next, you're going to need a food processor or a blender. So today I'm going to be using my Magic Bullet. This is the only size I have right now, so if you have a small one, that is totally okay. So let's get started. So I'm just going to start by adding my chickpeas that have again been drained and rinsed to my blender, like so. Next, I'm going to add a tablespoon of my tahini. I'm just kind of eyeballing this, adding that into my blender. All right, perfect. Next, I'm going to add my lemon juice. So be careful with this step. If you have any seeds in here, those can get into your blender, which we don't want. It's just not gonna come out the way we want it. So what I'm gonna do is use a little strainer, or you can squeeze it into your hand like so. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Squeeze my lemon juice to my blender. Like so. So now I have my tahini, my chickpeas, and my lemon juice added to my blender. Next, I just want to talk about our flavor additions just really quickly. So I have my garlic kind of just rough chopped here, and you can also use garlic powder and use any flavor addition you want. You can make all 3 of these flavors if you want. You can just make 1, so whatever is to your liking, go ahead and make that with me today. I've also got, again, my roasted red bell pepper here and my roasted beets. I purchased these roasted beets from Trader Joe's. They came in a pack like this. You can also buy just fresh beets, and then what you're gonna do is chop the ends off of them, throw them in a roasting pan with some water. You can throw some salt and pepper in there as well. Cover that with some foil or a lid, and then bake it for an hour at 400 degrees. Then go ahead and let it cool down in that liquid, and then once it does, you can easily peel the skin off of the beets, and then you have roasted beets. You can also buy roasted red bell pepper from the store in cans or jars. I just bought a fresh bell pepper and I stuck it in my oven at 400 degrees for about 30 minutes. You can also, if you have a gas burner at home, you can turn that on low, put your bell pepper carefully on top and kind of roast the outside. The point of this step is to be able to remove the skin on the outside and get a little extra roasty flavor to that bell pepper. So those are our toppings. Go ahead and choose which ones you like. So now I'm gonna go ahead and blend everything that I have in the blender here. Again, I have my strained and rinsed chickpeas, I have my tahini, and I have my lemon juice. So this is probably going to be a little hard to blend at first, but I'm just going to attempt to, and then I'm going to scrape down my sides. And then what we're gonna do is add just a little bit of water at a time, maybe 2 to 3 tablespoons, just to thin it out. And then I will come back once I have my hummus blended. All right, I'm back and I've got my hummus mostly blended up all nice and smooth. So you want it to be kind of about this consistency. It's gonna be nice and thick and creamy. And at this point is where you're gonna add your flavor of choice. So what I'm gonna do is start out with my garlic. I'm actually gonna use this as the base for all of my flavors. I really like garlic, so if you don't, go ahead and skip this step. So what I'm gonna do is just add my roughly chopped garlic to this blender and blend it again, and I will be right back. All right, so now I've got my chopped garlic added to my hummus, and you can go ahead and stop here if you'd like. If you just want a plain garlic hummus, it is delicious this way. And just a little note on the initial blending of the hummus, it will probably take several minutes, especially in a blender. And I had to use several tablespoons of water to get it to my desired consistency. Just be sure to go small and add a few tablespoons at a time so that way it doesn't get too thin. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate out my hummus into 3 separate portions, and then we're gonna go ahead and add in our flavors. So our roasted red bell pepper and our roasted beets. If you want just one flavor, go ahead and just pick which one you want and add it to this single can of garbanzo beans and all of our other ingredients that we have in here. Or you can make 2 batches and make 2 big portions of different flavors. So just go ahead and do whatever suits you best. So I am going to go ahead and get my hummus portioned out, and then we'll go ahead and add our flavors. I almost forgot, before we finish our garlic flavor and we start out our other flavors, what we're going to do is just season to taste with some salt and some pepper. So go ahead and add in some salt and some pepper. You can also add any other seasonings here that you like. Cumin tastes really good. So go ahead and just add your seasoning, blend it up, taste it, add a little more if you need to, and then we'll continue on from there. Okay, so now I've got my hummus all separated out into 3 portions. I've just saved a little bit of my plain garlic hummus here. And then I've separated 2 portions out to flavor with my roasted garlic and my, not my roasted garlic, my roasted red bell pepper and my roasted beets. So I'm gonna start off with my roasted red bell pepper. If you're doing this whole batch, all red bell pepper flavored, you can just use half of a roasted red bell pepper. But since I'm doing a small portion, I'm just gonna do about 1/4. So I'm just going to add that in here, and then I'm going to blend it on up again. So I've got my bell pepper in here, and then I will be right back. So I've added my bell peppers to my portioned out hummus, and I blended it up, and now we have our second flavor, so our roasted red bell pepper hummus, and it's going to be nice and creamy and smooth, as we can see here. So now I'm just going to pour this into its own container, and then I'm going to rinse out my blender and come back and we'll make our beet flavor. So I rinsed out my blender and I added my next portion of hummus for our roasted beet flavor. So what I'm going to do is take 1 small roasted beet and I'm going to blend it in here like so. And I will be right back. So So now I've got my beautiful beet hummus all blended up, and as we can see, it's nice and thick and creamy. Be careful when you're adding your roasted red bell pepper and your beet because it does have a little moisture in there, so if your hummus is a little too runny, that could be the reason. And to fix it, you could just add a little more garbanzo beans if you have those. So now I'm just going to plate up my 3 flavors of hummus, and then I'll be right back with you. I am back, and I have my 3 flavors of hummus all portioned up. So I have them all in their own little bowls here. A few little tips to make a nice, beautiful presentation. You can take a spoon. I happen to have these cute little spatulas, and what I'm going to do is just kind of go around and make a little swirl in the middle, like so. So I'm going to do that on each of mine. Here's my garlic hummus. So here's a little spoon. I'm just taking it, swirling it around to make some little crevices in there, and you'll see why in just a second. Here's my roasted red bell pepper hummus. All right. So now what I'm going to do is take some extra virgin olive oil, and I'm just going to drizzle a little bit on the top of these. It's going to nicely fall into those little crevices that I've made. Add a little bit of extra flavor there. Now what I'm going to do is take some smoked paprika, and I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit on top of my garlic hummus and my roasted red bell pepper hummus. I'm going to leave it off of my beet hummus because to me the flavor combinations don't really go together. So here are our finished products. This is our beet hummus. I've left it plain, but you can add a little bit of olive oil on top of it like this as well to give it just a little bit of extra dimension. And this is a really light pink colored hummus. If you want it more vibrant, you can add more beets to it. Also, I think if you roast your beets at home, you're gonna get a more vibrant flavor. This is the first time I've tried it with store-bought beets, and it's not quite as bright and vibrant as it usually is. So there you have it. Now you know how to make hummus if you didn't before. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you enjoy this recipe. All right, thank you so much if you have made it this far through this lecture. I hope you've learned something today. Please join me for my other 2 classes, Mindfulness Trust Your Gut, which was my first episode in this mini-series, and then for my 3rd episode, which is coming out next Friday, Physical Activity and Exercise Explained. And also, please feel free to contact me with any questions. My email is at the bottom. Again, my name is Brittany Kerrigan. Thanks again for joining me today. Bye.